Hello and welcome to the latest EnvCast episode. EnvCast is a Society for the Environment podcast bringing you environmental professionals in conversation each month. My name's Phil Underwood. I'm the engagement manager here at the Society for the Environment, and I'm going to be with you for this particular podcast. Our podcasts are designed to provide insight into the lives of registered environmental professionals, featuring experts from across a wide range of sectors and disciplines. We explore what they do, why they do it, how they got to where they are now, and their future ambitions. Each guest is registered as a chartered environmentalist, registered environmental practitioner, or registered environmental technician via one of our professional body partners, and they are known as our licensed members. As such, they have each been externally verified to affirm that they are committed to good practice in the environmental work that they do. To learn more about the Society for the Environment, our environmental registrations, and indeed our licensed members, please visit SocEnv.org.uk to find out more. Enjoy the podcast. Today, I am delighted to be joined by David Inman, CEnv. David is registered as a chartered environmentalist via the RICS, which is the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. But he's also a practitioner member of IEMA, which is another one of our licensed member professional bodies. Good morning, David. How are things this fine morning?
Good morning. The strange yellow thing is out in the sky, which we've not seen for a while. So it's nice and sunny here in Merseyside, and I hope it's good where you're based also.
It certainly is. I'm in the Midlands. I didn't realise you're going to be a Merseyside.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Start off with, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we've met just the one time, which was at the RICS offices in Birmingham.
It was. RICS held a meeting for Society for the Environment, and I was asked to say a few words on behalf of RICS. So it was really good to see all the constituent bodies there. And until you get everybody in a room, which unfortunately we can't do at the moment because of the pandemic, you don't realise how many constituent bodies there are. The list doesn't do it justice. It was quite impressive, to be honest.
This is true. There are quite a few member organisations of SocEnv, which we're very, very pleased about, actually. But it feels like, I must admit, I've met you many times because you pop up on my LinkedIn feed with various different videos that I watch. So it feels like I've met you a few times, but it is just the once in person.
It is. I've got to say, the way you interact with not just chartered environmentalists and the registered environmental technicians through the Society for the Environment. I think what SocEnv do on social media, in particular LinkedIn, is first class. So it's really good. And through the pandemic, I felt like I've actually come closer to the organisation. So it's something I've really appreciated. And thanks today for your time and letting me speak to you.
Well, thank you very much. That was a very unexpected compliment, but I'll pass that on to Sarah, who looks after our social media accounts very well. So we've certainly tried to adapt during these times, as all organisations have, really. So I'm glad it's working. But because of those videos, I'm actually quite looking forward to this chat, because I get the feeling that A, you're not particularly shy, and B, you're quite passionate about what you do, which is excellent. And we're going to kind of explore that for a bit. But to begin with, I've said that you're a chartered environmentalist via RICS, but that's about it. So with all of our EnvCasts, I'm just going to hand over to you for a second, just to tell us a little bit about what you do as a job.
So I'm a chartered environmental surveyor working for my own firm, DIEM Limited, based in Formby in Merseyside. In normal times, I'm here, there and everywhere. And in 2020, I was supposed to be dealing with sites from Glasgow down to Dorset. Pandemic, changed the way of working. So I'm a fellow of RICS, I'm a chartered environmentalist. I'm quite involved in RICS at a local level in terms of I'm on the North West Regional Board. So we do interact quite carefully and have lots of engagement with members, especially over the last year. I'm also an assessor and assessor chair for the RICS's assessment of professional competence, which I'm pleased to say I'm an assessor for the environmental surveying pathway, which is the pathway that I qualified as a chartered surveyor all those years ago. My work is mainly in the built environment, so I work in corporate real estate and facilities management mainly, but I've historically a wide range of clients. and I advise them on ISO 14001, 50001, general ESG and CSR governance and development, and also a lot of compliance work. It's quite exciting at the moment. The corporate real estate investment work are really driving ISO 14001 for GRESB accreditation and benchmarking. So it's a really exciting time for the built environment, and especially the commercial property world for environmental management.
Okay. Exciting is good in this changing world. There's a lot of challenges out there. How long have you had your own business? 15
years. It's going to be 16 years this year, so I've kind of got used to it by now.
Okay. Always based from home anyway.
Always
based
from home. Yeah. It's always been myself. I find it's easy to deliver to clients that way. The downside is I am the accountant. I do make the tea. The only other person who gets involved in the business is some non-client confidential business development discussions with my wife, who's also a great source of support, and also my accountant, who does the legal bookkeeping side of things. But everything else I do myself, from business development and winning work, social media side, I find very important because it's effective and it's free, and you do get to interact at a very influential level with stakeholders. So yeah, 15 years, I'm quite used to it now. And I always face it home.
Does it feel like 15 years?
No.
No. It's flown by, I assume.
It actually feels like I've had 4 separate roles, because there's been some shifts of clients. So when I first started off in 2005, it was mainly construction clients. Then probably 8 years after that, there was a shift to working mainly in facilities management. Now there's a shift to being split between facilities management and commercial property investment. So it's been quite a nice organic journey through the whole realm of the built environment. So I'm not just stuck at one thing. It's been a nice journey, to be honest, and who knows where the journey's going, hopefully in the next 15 years.
Excellent. And do you think, was that mainly those transitions, were they planned? Were they kind of part planned? Did they kind of happen organically, or?
It happened organically. 20 years ago, I went for a job interview, and I was talking about environmental management in property investments, and the person interviewing me said, "You're about 10, 15 years too early." And 20 years later, I'm where, I won't say I proposed the industry to be, I wasn't that visionary, but I'm very comfortable. I thought, 20 years ago, this is where roughly I wanted to be. But the change in the business has been organic. I've got some very long-term relationships with clients, but client work does come to an end. And I'm pleased to say all client work has come to an end very harmoniously, and we kept in touch. And and work does come to an end in consultancy. And it's how you manage that work, end it, make sure you've delivered it well, and then you move on to the next job. And that has driven the organic change, to be honest, the move from, long-term relationships from one client to another, and, one client's introduced me to another client, and the saying, you're only as good as the last job, and never burn your bridges. 15 years ago, when I set out on this sole practitioner path, I went straight back to the employer that I'd left. And I'd worked working for a previous employer. Then I worked for an old boss of mine. So never burn your bridges. And when a business relationship comes to a natural end, treat it as a natural end. Nothing lasts forever. And I do see some people trying to desperately cling on to clients. And, when the work's ended, be proud of yourself. You've done a good job, and next.
Yeah, adapt, move on, and make new successes out there. What you said earlier as well, so we talked to various environmental professionals on EnvCast, and from lots of different backgrounds, working for larger organizations, working for themselves, and so on. But what you've said about the fact that you are, you do the work, you are the accountant, you are business development, social media, all of that kind of stuff, that all fits in within being self-employed, and you can certainly do that as an environmental professional.
Yes,
I just think it's a really important thing
Well,
you know,
60% of chartered surveyors are employed by SMEs, which is an interesting statistic.
Okay. Was having your own business always on the cards for you? Or again, was that...
I always had an inkling, but I thought I'd be, well, probably a little bit older than I am now. And it was towards the end of my career. It actually happened quite nicely. I worked for an organisation. We got audited through it wasn't a certification scheme, but it was an environmental award scheme. And the auditor worked for himself. And I just said to him one day, I always fancied working for myself. And about 2 weeks later, he rang me back and said, are you serious? I went, yeah. And he said, look, if you thought about it, there'd be some work via me through it. And I went, that's an interesting conversation. Spoke to a colleague of mine. He said, you know what? If you did that, I've got some work for you. Was very honest with my employer, set up the company, handed him a notice. And as I said, within a few months, went back to my employer and, I've kept good relationships with, colleagues there over the years. But it was that break and I thought, well, I'll give it a year. I can afford to do it for a year. And after a year, I'll review it. And the year went well. Then the financial banking crisis hit and I weathered the storm through that. And I went to a very good RICS lecture called Survive and Thrive in the Recession. And I think that's what businesses have had to do during, the last year in the pandemic. So it's you've got to be adaptable, and it's just kept plodding on. There's been no grand strategy. I hate to say it, might not sound very good, but there's been no grand strategy. But it's just been about delivering quality work, sensibly priced to clients, and that's been the driver all the way through the life of the business.
Well, given what you said earlier about, going from different types of work throughout the 15 years that you've been going, that obviously shows that adaptability and being able to move with what your clients are expecting and, what people are looking for.
And it's also different models of delivery. Some clients want to be seen as employing a consultancy firm. So we've engaged with DIEM Limited to provide our professional services. Others aren't really that bothered who I work for. Some people just want me. I do subcontract work, so I work on behalf of other organisations. So you've got to be flexible and don't think, well, I've got this fantastic brand. I can only work under this brand. No, you've got to adapt. Yeah. You really have, and be flexible and meet the needs of clients. And as I said, some aren't remotely bothered who you work for. They just want your services. Some just want me, I think, as an individual. Some want to be seen to be employing a consultancy firm. So, even working for your own sole practitioner firm, you've got to be adaptable in the way you manage.
Okay. You mentioned earlier a few things that you do as an organisation, or as yourself. I'd like to just dig a little bit deeper into that, really. And so what are the services that you offer? You mentioned ISO 14001, things like that. But what is it that you do? What services do you provide to them? And how does that work? How does that benefit them?
I provide a resource, and often, mainly it's a resource that they don't have in-house. So I probably save organisations, £100,000 a year in recruiting an environmental energy sustainability manager. And I'm a flexible resource, so I will meet their demands, and I'll also instantly bring my expertise straight to the table. Don't forget, I've got 20 years experience in environmental auditing. So I can, companies who it's a new journey and it's new for them, I think I've got quite a nice touch in explaining it. I do think a lot of companies are quite nervous and apprehensive about the sustainability journey and, their environmental compliance. And it's about making it easy for them. They can't palm off all the responsibilities on me, but make it understandable, digestible and easy for them. And I do the heavy lifting, whether it is, the low-level document control for an EMS, whether it is the higher-level compliance and negotiating with regulators, whether it is dealing with certification bodies. And I do find that most trepidation with people new to certification is the certification audit. It strikes fear, and it shouldn't do. And it's my job to, 1, technically deliver it, 2, manage it, and 3, guide the client through it. So that's it entirely depends on the client. I do say that clients in 2021 are far more engaged with ESG, 14,001 and 50,001 than they were 10, 15 years ago. I do see a lot more commitments at board level, and the organisations I work with, the smallest client's got 3 employees, the largest manages $250 billion worth of investments, and it's all points in between. But I do see that the senior management responsibility, and I don't know if it's the current version of ISO 14001 driving this, where you can't palm off top management responsibility. Oh, it's the management representative. It's the quality manager's responsibility. I don't know if it's that's driven it, or I think they've realised that they need to be doing it. It's not an add-on. It's not a bolt-on. I deal with FTSE listed firms, New York Stock Exchange listed firms, and their environmental and social governance is critical to how these businesses are organised. And it's really refreshing for environmental professionals in the marketplace that, 15 years ago, you were kind of pushing the agenda, and now you've got willing participants. And it's obviously it's good for the planet, good for the environment, but it's good for our profession as well.
I could quite agree. And I think that opinion and experience of what people have seen over the last, I don't know how many years really, but it's certainly changing, which is excellent. There's a lot to be done, obviously, and we're talking about professions and sectors, that all of them really, because they all have an impact, don't they? And they all have a role to play in creating a more sustainable, greener future, really, which will help future generations and ourselves, hopefully, if we do it quick enough. So the next thing I wanted to look at really is the surveying side.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you're an active member of RICS and so on, and you're going to have to forgive my lack of knowledge here. And I must admit, I'm going to exaggerate my lack of knowledge for the podcast, but I've just been interested to find out a little bit more about the surveying side. So my knowledge is kind of limited, and I must admit, my first kind of glimpse of surveying is when I was at Coventry University, and I walked past one of the faculty buildings where every day there was always a group of students standing outside in high-vis jackets with their big yellow tripods, and they looked like they were measuring things. But I'm highly assuming there's a bit more to surveying than that.
Well, the Latin motto of RICS is est modus in rebus, which is there is measure in all things. Okay. And to describe a surveyor, that's how to do it. Look, we're a broad technical organisation. Traditionally, I come from a mineral surveying background. So my degree was an RICS accredited degree in mineral estate management, which had a very heavy environmental content. So it was very heavy on environmental law, planning and development. I did a placement year working for an open cast coal operator. So the experience I had at university on this RICS accredited degree was superb. And yes, we did bash the odd lights, and we used measuring on a hill on a Friday morning, and then we went underground to measure because it was a minerals degree. I found the skills transferable, into the civil engineering industry and then into consultancy. But in terms of RICS, you've got to think it's a very broad profession, from people who value property. How much is this building worth? How much will it be worth in 5 years' time? To building surveyors who are basically building doctors, whether they're assessing the home you're thinking of buying or commercial buildings, finding problems, identifying defects and recommending improvements to buildings. There's rural surveyors who deal with all matters agricultural, whether it's buying or selling farms, sustainable farming methods, valuing cattle. Quantity surveyors who measure the fabric of buildings. So I think quantity surveyors are the real drivers in the profession for carbon reduction, because they quantify construction projects. So they can calculate easier than the rest of us the embodied carbon content of the construction materials. Then there's chartered environmental surveyors, and we're an even more broad brush, so quite general practitioners such as myself, or the chartered environmental surveyors deal in land quality and contaminated land and renewable energy. I don't think anybody else now. Antiques and fine arts. I've never actually met an antique and fine arts surveyor, but there are quite a healthy community out there. Facility management surveyors who manage the buildings. And during the pandemic, all facilities managers have been at the front end of things. Apologies if I've missed anybody out. Geomatic surveyors who measure land, and they're the ones you may see out with the theodolites. And I've probably offended one or two professional groups by missing them out, but that roughly covers the profession. And there still is a healthy minerals section who it's not just about it was heavily in the past about the coal industry, but it has adapted to about renewable energy and waste from energy. So technically, I hope I'm not spun this on too much, but technically we are a very technically diverse profession and diverse in terms of nationalities. We're all around the world. I think there's 130,000 members, so we're a large organisation. And they've got members on 6 continents. So in terms of a global presence, that's why RICS are at the top table for, World Built Environment Forum and, and COP21. That's why RICS has a collective. We're at the front of it. In the past, we probably 10, 15 years ago, we're slightly following in terms of the environment. And I'm really proud to say, I think at the moment, we're actually leading the agenda.
Okay, well,
that's
so my knowledge has improved somewhat in the last couple of minutes. So that's good. It's quite a range of in terms of surveying professionals. There is a massive range there, and I can only assume that quite a few would have impacts on, the decisions they make would have impacts on the environment, and that's going to be hugely broad as well. But we won't delve too much into that. But I probably will touch on it in a bit. Now that you've mentioned the array of different options there are for surveying, and we've already mentioned the pandemic a couple of times, how is the surveying world, which is obviously again quite broad, how is it dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think it's twofold. First of all, is delivering our work. How do we inspect buildings when we're not allowed in? And yes, RICS have given some emergency guidance for gathering valuation evidence, but surveys are incredibly adaptable. For example, I've delivered work during the pandemic in Italy and France. I would have loved to have gone. A bit of winter sun would have been nice next to Lake Garda, but unfortunately, I couldn't get anywhere near. So, technology it's really pushed technology to the fore, and I can carry out inspections via video all around the world. The second one is how we use the built environment, and I think this is the biggest challenge, not just during the pandemic, but how we recover from it. There's lots of unoccupied office space at the moment in city centres. Don't forget, companies have had to demobilise these offices, secure them, and they've got to keep rent being collected and also being maintained. And don't forget, there's been transactions going on during this. I know, commercial property surveyors, and the market's kept going, which has been a fantastic thing. But, the big challenge is now, and I was discussing this with a client yesterday, is the reoccupation of offices, how we use the space, how we use the place. And this is going to be the big challenge. And we're not just talking about COVID security, so working patterns, biosecurity, working densities, but also any future working patterns. I really don't think that we're going to ever return to everybody working in the office 9 to 5, despite what Goldman Sachs say in the news this morning. So I think surveyors are going to be at the fore of adaptability and functionality of definitely in the commercial property world. In the residential world, I don't think surveyors have been as busy, to be honest, with the mini boom in the housing market caused by the stamp duty holiday. All the private practices I speak to have been relatively buoyant, which is good. During the financial crash, unfortunately, we did lose 1 or 2 firms.
Yeah.
Thankfully, so far during the pandemic, we haven't lost anybody business-wise. So I think that's quite healthy. And I think that's all across consultancy, other environmental professionals. Everybody seems, apart from the miserable restrictions put on us, and things could be worse, to be honest. I think everybody's really reasonably buoyant that they've got through this difficult year, and now there's some optimism.
Yeah. I think lots of people are adapting. Obviously, a lot of people are better off than others, but it's a challenge that we're all continuing to face, and wishing everyone the best with getting through that from a personal perspective and a business perspective, really. So, moving on from COVID, we'll try not to mention it again. Why did you choose to do surveying and the environmental consulting side? What did one come before the other? Or
the surveying side come on about 16. When I got over I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a rock star,
still working on that.
It was my geography master at Queen Elizabeth's Grammar School in Blackburn, who, I'm still in touch with him. And I was going to do a geography degree because I found it interesting, especially the physical geography side of it. And I didn't really want to be stuck in a classroom for 3 or 4 years. And one day in a lesson, he says, who remembers this chap from last year? He's doing a degree at Sheffield City Polytechnic, and I am showing my age because I did go to a polytechnic, and he's doing this course called Mineral Estate Management. So that sounds interesting. So I got the brochure, and it showed 2 guys underground, and I thought, that looks different, I'll apply. So I applied, as you just apply for university, and the course leader, who was a chartered surveyor, rung me up and said, come and see us in Sheffield. So I went down and he sold it to me. Basically, he put his arm around me and said, look, we want to give people a professional education as well as an academic education. So I thought, well, I'm getting 2 for the price of 1 here. And they really made me feel welcome. And I think that was a really good introduction to the world of surveying. It is a welcoming, family type network, and you keep the same, you make lots of good friends through it. And that was the reason why I went surveying, just the profession in terms of Sheffield Polytechnic, Sheffield Hallam University, welcoming me as a prospective undergraduate. And when I got on the course was really difficult. It was kind of 60, 70 hours studying a week. So it was none of the usual students' frivolities, and they treat it as a job. It was pretty intense degree, but they treat it like the workplace. So there was no, mollycoddle or anything like that. It was quite a harsh environment because it was the minerals industry, and it's quite a rough and tumble industry. So then, I was doing a surveying degree, and there's a lot of environmental content. So we started off with the basic surveying, so valuation and landlord and tenant law, a lot of the legal side of it. And in the second year, we started doing environmental law, and I loved it. And started doing planning and development, which I found really interesting. The third year, we all vanished, went on placements, and I went working for a on-cast coal mining company. And I was doing all the environmental monitoring for them, and dealing with angry residents, and really put in at the deep end. And I really enjoyed it. So I thought, it interests me, it's relevant. Went back to do the 4th year of the degree, and there was even more environmental content. And that really gave me the transferable skills to take it from the minerals industry to the railway industry, and then the railway civil engineering industry, then into private practice. So it's these transferable skills. And I always laugh that I still use some of the same techniques I learned at university over 25 years ago. I graduated in 1996, so it's quite a long time ago. And it's the skills have carried on with me, which is useful.
Very useful indeed. Yeah. It's not always the case that people do at university what they end up doing. I am a case in point in that, it's fair to say. But so you mentioned there, obviously, the surveying side came from the degree and your geographical kind of knowledge and that kind of thing, and into the minerals and so on. So taking all that learning forwards into what you do now, how does that surveying background knowledge, and obviously what you've developed over the years, how does that result in positive impacts for the environment? Is it a few different areas that links to?
It is. It's first of all having a relevant and up-to-date environmental knowledge and be able to demonstrate this professionally. But it's also the traditional surveying subjects that may crop up in conversations. recently I've been getting involved in landlord and tenant matters again, so I've had to refresh my landlord and tenant law knowledge by going on a course again. But it's that background to the commercial, especially the commercial property world and facilities management, where there are contractual relationships in place between landlord and tenants that do have a big impact on the environment. And even how things, sub-metering, energy control in buildings with tenants, all these things that are entwined in landlord and tenant agreements have a big impact on the environment. Okay,
interesting. And do you feel like you're making a difference in what you do with your clients from an environmental point of view?
From two reasons. I tend to make it deliverable for clients, something that it may historically been found quite dry. I have made applicable to them and delivered results, whether it be reduction of waste, diversion of waste from landfill, and actually showing physical data. So yes, you've improved your performance. Energy management, improving performance, energy performance indicators. Look, you're improving as a business. Now they can use this, first of all, in any carbon reporting, and with SECAR, that's mandatory. And secondly, in the marketplace, making themselves more attractive businesses through their ESG strategy, through the corporate governance. And really, that started driving businesses. It's been I think the last 3 years has been critical for businesses, how they've changed and how sustainability is driving them, rather than it being something they had to do. Now it's something they want to do.
Okay, well, that's always a good change, really. And I must admit, from a Society for the Environment point of view and professional registrations, we're possibly going the other way. We want to move it from something that people might like to do in terms of gaining their chartership, something that they really should do, kind of thing. So it's a little bit of a difference there, I think. But I know you probably can't talk about all of your projects, but are there any particular projects that stand out that you're able to talk about in any way? Or
I think over the last year, supporting a client with certification in the EU when we can't go there, and the certification body can't go there.
Right.
We did. It was quite interesting how we set this off quite as an unknown, thinking, well, we've got a site in Italy and a site in Paris, and how on earth are we going to audit them? Well, we can audit them via video, and we'll worry about the stage 2 audit. Well, we'll be out of the pandemic then. It'll all be over with. We'll be fine. And we went to the second lockdown. It's kind of, hold on a minute. So the certification body we dealt with was excellent. And then we said, look, we're going to change the scope. Again, adaptability. So rather than the physical on-site application of facilities management, it's how the organisation managed that from their office in London. So we still got certification, not necessarily with the address on the certificate because we can't physically go. So I think the way we've adapted and carried on delivering for clients during the pandemic, that's been the recent highlight for me, and something I'm quite proud of. Delivered the work, made the clients happy, and not let them down in a time where we could have gone, well, can't get the odds there, sorry. No, we've got to deliver.
Yeah. Wow. Remember when Brexit was a problem? Crikey.
You know what? I've got a good friend who works in business continuity, and he said companies are coping really well with the pandemic because they kind of got ready for Brexit with business continuity, and it just never quite happened. So they were already put a lot of things in place. Yeah. So when the pandemic hit, it wasn't such. It was a shock, but they had the business continuity arrangements in place. So yeah. But going back to other career highlights, probably bragging a little bit, the big highlight was in 2018 when I met Majesty the Queen as part of our ICS's 150th anniversary. And without, you're not allowed to, as Prime Ministers have talked about, you're not allowed to discuss what you talk to Her Majesty about, but, the environment and sustainability agenda did come up during our brief chat, which was like, wow. I wasn't expecting to meet her on the day, and it's kind of, there you go, you meet her. Oh, I'm glad I didn't know, actually. I slept the night before, but, she was lovely and engaging and interested. Yeah. I was really, really interested in everybody, and yeah, fantastic.
Wow. So you've met me once and you've met the Queen once.
I have,
that is quite...
So when the Society for the Environment is 150 years old, We'll get her in there.
Excellent. Well, we've got 133 years to go, I think, but we'll get there eventually. Excellent. So let's talk about. We haven't really mentioned too much about you. The fact that you're actually a chartered environmentalist. But so why did you become a CEnv?
I was a chartered environmental surveyor. I had MRICS after my name. This is a bit of a quirk from RICS, a bit of a legacy hangover. There's things called alternative chartered designations. So whilst I can call myself a chartered environmental surveyor, I've no bit of paper that says that. I just have a certificate saying you are a chartered surveyor. And that was a reason so I could get some professional recognition within RICS. And it just felt like a natural progression, to be honest. I could have done it via IEMA, but I thought, no, IEMA, but RICS is my main professional body. And, let's do it through them and promote it from within. And I think about career development, I think a lot of chartered surveyors are quite hesitant to do more qualifications straight after qualifying, because the assessment of professional competence is a bit of a grind. It's fairly hard going. So qualifying as a chartered surveyor, you're not really in the mood to do anything else for quite a while. But I'd recommend to any freshly qualified chartered surveyor who's eligible to apply for chartered environmentalist, just carry on. While you're in the mood, carry on, because it's well worth it.
Is there a bit of transferability between the two in terms of the experience and the competence that you require?
Very much so. A lot of the ethics for the assessment of professional competence is quite a big emphasis on RICS, rules of conduct for members, rules of conduct for firms. And there's very big similarities between the SocEnv rules of conduct and RICS's. And I have put a free video on YouTube just discussing this and why, chartered surveyors should, it's a natural progression. I do think it's a natural progression. But the reason I did it, I just thought it's another qualification that I can go for.
Okay.
What I have found since I qualified, though, it's a great harmoniser. I've gone into organisations where they've been CIOM and IEMA members and thought, why have we got a chartered surveyor working? You're a bunch of like theodolite bashers and inspecting houses and stuff. But I found out, it's like I explained to them what I did. I found the CEnv has been a great harmoniser between all the licensed bodies, and I think that's the big benefit of the qualification. Within SocEnv, it's technically probably as diverse as any organisation, professional organisation out there. But I think it just harmonises us all. We're part of one family. And as I said before, during the pandemic, the I Am CEnv campaign was superb. And I learned more about my colleagues within CEnv through it. It was really good.
Good. Well, I'm glad that helps. And I'm pleased you said that the CEnv registration and the other registrations, I guess, they do provide that continuity and what kind of, you're talking to someone who understands different elements of the environment. It might not necessarily be the same things because, like you say, it's so diverse, but you can still start that conversation. You're both chartered environmentalists. You have a what's the phrase I'm looking for? I don't know. A similar view on things, probably, and a similar goal to what you're trying to aim for, I suppose.
Definitely. Any chartered surveyor's thinking of going for it, it isn't another APC. When I did mine 10 years ago, whenever I did it, it wasn't really. I thought, it's going to be an interview and it's going to be an assessment, as the assessment of professional competencies. It's an hour of extreme stress, I've got to say, as an assessor.
That's the way to sell it.
No, for the well-prepared candidate, it is more of a discussion. For the not very well-prepared candidate, it can be slightly more taxing. But the chartered environmentalist final, the interview with RICS was just chat. and a nice discussion. We explored various sustainability concepts, and is that we're done? Yeah, all right, fine. It was actually an enjoyable process, which not all assessments are, but I found that becoming a chartered environmentalist was an enjoyable, not only useful but enjoyable process.
Well, after the RICS process, which you mentioned is quite intense and so on, the CEnv is probably a little bit less intense, which will come as a light relief possibly once you've done the RICS side of things.
But when you look at the competences of SocEnv, the competencies are very similar. So I think even though it's less intense, I don't think it's less rigorous. If you,
I understand what you mean. Yeah. Now, being entirely open and honest, there's not a huge amount of chartered environmentalists at RICS.
No,
and there's a few. There is a good few, but in comparison to other professional bodies, there aren't many. And you've mentioned that one of those reasons might be that people have gone through the RICS process and think, I'm going to have a bit of a break now. But why do you? And you've also mentioned that some people might think, well, you're a surveyor. Why are you a chartered environmentalist? Are those kind of perceptions in the way, do you think, or?
I think that hits a nail on the head, to be honest. It is an interesting one. It is disappointing, I think, how many, a few CMs there are out of RICS members. It is well publicised within RICS. The main driver, I think, is if you apply to be an RICS fellow, having an RICS certification, which CEnv falls under, is one of the qualifying criteria to be a fellow. So if anybody I always say this to prospective chartered environmentalists, if you ever want to go for RICS fellowship, CEnv will act as one of the criteria. So that's a big incentive for MRICS chartered surveyors to get CEnv. Okay,
did not know that. And through that conversation, this absolutely isn't a dig at RICS because they are a fantastic organisation, but it's just one of those things that we're looking to explore a little bit more. So,
I think as an organisation, it has had to change over the last year. It's gone to a digital first approach, and there's a very good knowledge platform that's got some very good sustainability content on it for members, which has never been there before. They use a IEMA platform, and there's lots of good professional discussions and engagements on there. So I think as a profession, we're in a better place to discuss sustainability internally. About 5 years ago, RICS did some leading edge work with UN Global Compact, did it, launched it to great fanfare, and it hid on the website for about 3 years. And it was quite disappointing after all the hard work the organisation had done with the UN, and it was a toolkit for sustainable development for land, construction and real estate. But late in 2018, they had a campaign called Value the Planet, which was to say, look, we do value the planet, not just professionally, but as an organisation. So, there have been some great strides probably in the last 2 or 3 years internally to promote the sustainability agenda to members. And now there's the IEMA platform where we can go and discuss it, and it's not on LinkedIn and the usual, endless discussion trails on LinkedIn. It is a professional forum. So I think this is where the digital virtual world is working for us.
Okay, I might speak to you a little bit more about IEMA. I've heard of IEMA. Quite a few organisations use it, but the Value of the Planet campaign, and there's all sorts of different information on there, which is really interesting. So if you are wanting to know a little bit more about how the surveying world value the planet, go onto the RICS website, have a look at that. It is very interesting indeed. Now I'm going to wrap up now because we're going to run out of time, I think, but a couple of questions. What's next for you?
What's next for me? Right, I'm quite excited about Terra Carta at the moment, which was launched in January this year by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. And this looks at sustainability through using responsible capitalism. And it goes beyond Paris Climate Agreements, UN Global Compact. And this is something that excites me greatly. So I've signed my company up to it. And so I would encourage anybody who runs an organisation who has a responsible approach to the environment to look up Terra Carta and sign up for it. It is free and it's becoming quite a good network. It comes from the Prince's Sustainable Markets Initiative, and I think having Prince Charles at the front, he was probably one of the original environmental thought leaders. So he's been talking about it for 50 years. So I think it's just, I think it's a very exciting place to be at. Another for the future, again, encourage more chartered surveyors to become chartered environmentalists and to come out of the pandemic a better performing professional than I went into it. I was working in London when Lombardy got locked down. I thought, it's not going to happen here. 2 weeks later, we're all working from home. I was asked to set up a call on MS Teams. And it's like, how do I do that? So we all learned very quickly, but I think we're all going to come out of it more agile and smarter working professionals. Yes, it's been a terrible catastrophe for humankind, but I think, there will be some positives that come out of it.
I think so, yeah. I think in terms of learning how to use Zoom and MS Teams and so on everyone's annual review this year, what have you learned this year? I've learned how to do Zoom calls and Microsoft Teams calls. And I think it's going to be quite a common one.
Yes.
And you mentioned Prince Charles there. I just wanted to mention that he is one of our honorary fellows. So, which is because of his long-lasting work on promoting and doing good things for the environment. Really, he's been quite the ambassador. So, last question, which possibly links into Prince Charles. If you're able to influence world leaders, which I imagine Prince Charles would class as, what would be the one thing that you would do? Could be anything.
Run a small business for a day.
You would ask them to run a small bit. Okay.
Yes.
Oh.
Reconcile my accounts on Xero, and just realise that all the work that you don't see. So we're synchronised swimmers, and we're all very elegant above the water, but below the water, the legs are thrashing away. Ground yourself in reality. Yeah. Travel to work on the train if it's safe to do so. Security comes into it, but and talk to people. And I think that's why Prince Charles is such a valid leader for Terra Carta. Is that I've never met him, unfortunately, but he seems very good at talking to people, and he will talk to people. So I think and he's the original role model. Yeah,
well, I think that's would be a really useful activity for world leaders to do, just to step into other people's shoes and try and run a business for a day.
We'll swap. This means swapping.
Oh, swapping. Okay.
The penthouse apartment for a day and get the chauffeur limousine. Yeah.
I see. There's more to this than we first thought. Well, thank you very much for your time today, David. I very much hope we meet again soon, whenever that might be, in whatever form that might be in. But thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Look after yourself.
If you're curious to hear more about the Chartered Environmentalist, Registered Environmental Practitioner or Registered Environmental Technician registrations, please take a look at our How to Become and Why Become recorded webinars on our website, socenv.org.uk. Or you can find them on our YouTube channel, just search for Society for the Environment, where you'll also find a variety of topical environmental webinar series and various different insights from our registrants. You can also follow us on Twitter at SocEnv_HQ to keep up to date with all of the latest goings on at the Society. We release a new episode of EnvCast on the first Wednesday of each month. So if you're interested in future podcasts, please subscribe to hear more from us. You can subscribe and review through a variety of different platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Castbox. Thank you very much for listening or watching on YouTube. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode of EnvCast next month.